Happy Sunday, everybody. I hope you've been enjoying the week one of Foundations. And I just wanted to say really quickly that I want to give a shout out to Jay Campos for joining as a YouTube member. I appreciate the support. And with that, let's get started on the meta breakers. And every Sunday, what I like to do is go over my best of one meta breakers, which are all decks that were successfully piloted into Mythic with at least a 60% win rate and won at least or played for at least 50 games. And so it's kind of a fun way to look at, like, you know, some off meta picks, some picks that have not been working for a lot of people. So definitely craft with care. You know, these decks haven't worked for a good chunk of people, but they've worked for this specific pilot. So if you know what you're doing and you have your plan, you can get this strategy to work. So this was Rakdos Pact, or Rakdos Pact combo by Apache, and went 37 and 22 for a 63% win rate into Mythic. And the whole point of this one is to give the Demonic Pact, which you run through the options until the last remaining option is you lose the game. And before that happens, you give it to them with the Harmless Offering, right? Target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. And then because this isn't per player, it's just once one of those has been chosen, it can't be chosen again. They have to choose the one at the beginning of their upkeep and they lose the game. So clearly you have to play around the counter spell that can completely disrupt this combo and leave you kind of hanging. And then the rest of it is to just kind of stall interaction, to stall until you can pull the combo off. So you've got like sweepers like the Brotherhood's End, you've got Torch the Tower, you've got Go for the Throat, ways to attack the hand like Duress to make sure that they don't have the counter spell to blow up your Harmless Offering. Final Vengeance as a way to kind of take advantage of the sack fodder in this deck too, because like Hopeless Nightmare, you can use that to bargain your Beseech the Mirror so that you can go find your combo pieces. You can use the Urbrask's Forge as well as fodder for bargaining the tokens that it creates. So it works pretty well with the Final Vengeance. And then Dreams of Steel and Oil is kind of an alternative to Duress. And then Tiny Bones joins up. It helps you with additional sack fodder, making them discard, attacking their resources. So Bitter Reunion helps you mill through your deck and kind of pump fake a little bit, because I think a lot of times when people see Bitter Reunion, they imagine that they're up against some form of Rakdos Reanimator. And then you've also got the Disturbing Mirth, which gives you even more stuff that you can sacrifice to the Beseech the Mirror. Children of the Apocalypse here just kind of gives you a little bit of stabilization against aggro, helps with all the card draw that this deck can be doing. So this does have a best of 3 sideboard, but the pilot did climb to Mythic successfully in best of 1. I have not personally explored this one in best of 1 or best of 3. I haven't really seen it performing particularly well. So craft with care, again, I mentioned that. But it's a fun little combo, especially if your opponent doesn't realize what you're doing until it's too late. And I've had matches where I've come up against it and like known that they were going to do the Demonic Pact, and sometimes you still have a difficult time stopping them from pulling it off, depending on what strategy you're running. So, and this one's a repeat. So we have Omniscience, which I talked about last week in the Meta Breakers, and I try to not repeat the same off-meta picks. I try to keep it to new archetypes that have been popping up each week. But I wanted to give this one a special shout out because Drowsy Trickster saw it on my channel, I believe. At least it was labeled the same way that I label my stuff on Moxfield. So they might be a part of the community. If you are here, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. But anyway, they went 85 and 53 for a 62% win rate into Mythic. And since I did cover this last week, I won't talk about it too much, but basically you're trying to use the Collector's Vault to get the Omniscience discarded into your graveyard to then use Reenact the Crime to be able to get it back into play, and then you get to play all of your cards for free. And the main win condition in the deck is Jace, the Perfected Mind, milling your opponent out, but you can also use this as well as the Great Door as ways to enable hitting into your combo. So 2 combo decks this week. And number 3 here is Boros Burn, and by E13A, went 61 and 43 for a 59% win rate, but they continued playing it into Mythic. So prior to hitting Mythic, it was above a 60%, and this is a good example of, we're going to cover a couple of decks like the Boros Burn, Golgari Midrange, mono white tokens that haven't been performing particularly well in best of one. Now, just because they haven't been performing well in best of one does not mean that you cannot take them to Mythic. And I've said this time and time again, you can take any deck you want to Mythic. It just depends on how good of a player you are and how lucky you get as well. So with that being said, Boros Burn has not been working for a good chunk of the people who have been trying it out. But E13A was able to get this one to work, and you can see they kind of went a little bit differently than what we've seen, kind of like a mono red burn deck that was just bringing in the Boros Charm, and then the rest of the deck was just mono red. So this one deciding to bring in the lightning strikes and the lightning helix, as well as the lightning strikes and the burst lightning and the bolt wave. So a couple of different ways to go about it. They decided to run the Restless Bivouac and the Thran Portal to Abraded Bluffs, just to really make sure that they have the red and white mana. And then they kept the Hired Claw as your like number one drop that you're really going to want to try to hit. And the Slickshot Show-Off works pretty well with the double strike off of the Boros Charm, but again, this archetype has been struggling a little bit. And then the Screaming Nemesis, I really like the inclusion here because you can shoot it with like a Burst Lightning to prevent your opponent from gaining life, so that they don't get out of your reach for the Boros Burn strategy. Number 4 is Golgari Midrange, and we've talked about this deck a fair amount in Best of 3, where you see it quite a bit more often. And but they were able to successfully climb with this. So this was by Soul77, went 36 and 20 for a 64% win rate into Mythic. And nothing really new here from what we've been seeing in Best of 3. So we see 1 Scavenging Ooze instead of 2. We can see like Shieldred the Apocalypse bringing it in against all of the aggro in Best of 1 makes a lot of sense. Running the 3 Archfiend of the Dross to hate on all of the mono red, and then a lot of the interaction that we do usually see. I don't 100% agree with running Cut Down on 1 or on 3 instead of 4, but that is just a personal preference thing. And so if we want to know more about this deck's strategy, we have talked about it a fair amount. But Soulstorm Sanctuary, I think, is going to see more and more play as time goes on. It's been a pretty decent manland, and if you haven't explored it yet, I checked it out in mono black, and I think it will find a home somewhere. So, but yeah, you've got like really great demon synergies with the Archfiend of the Dross and the Unholy Annex, and then you've got a whole bunch of black interaction, cut down, go for the throat, anoint with affliction to hate on your opponents, like mono Boros Auras, mono red aggro, Rakdos aggro, etc. And then you've also got the Terra Sunder, which can be pointed removal, but it also can destroy artifacts and enchantments. So can be a really good answer to the Sheltered by Ghosts as well. And also the like Caretaker's Talents decks and the mono white that you see more often in Best of 3. And speaking about Best of 3 decks being played in Best of 1, mono white Token Control by Zeras was taken 137 and 82 for a 63% win rate. So they played it from legitimately bronze, the very bottom of bronze, all the way up into Mythic. And so it's always fun to see a full climb. So this one, again, is a strategy that we typically see in Best of 3, and not too much different from what I was talking about during my Best of 1, Best of 3 meta review last week. So we can see that they decided to just run the Sunken Citadels and not bring in the red, which is usually for the sideboarded Imidane's Recruiter. Leaning heavily into the token synergies off of Beza, Archangel Elspeth, Virtue of Loyalty, the Overlord of the Mistmoors, all to trigger your Caretaker's Talent for card draw. Got a single copy of the Temporary Lockdown in here, and then Enduring Innocence also helps you get additional card draw off of all of your tokens, not to mention Carrot Cake. This deck can struggle a little bit against the mono red strategies, Rakdos aggro, mono red, Boros Auras, because of having limited instant speed interaction. So this one leaning entirely on Get Lost and Soul Partition to be able to disrupt your opponent's kind of targeting with the Sheltered by Ghosts, which is why I think you bring in the 1 copy of the Temporary Lockdown to help up against Boros Auras. And yeah, so that's mono white. All right, the sixth one we're going to talk about this week is Orzhov Superfriends. And this archetype's been around for a while. It's nothing new to Foundations, but this one was taken by Martin for 41 and 24 for a 63% win rate into Mythic. This is a particularly nice strategy if you are coming up against a lot of mono black, because same thing with like Sunfall. The Planeswalkers kind of punish a whole bunch of the interaction that's just kind of a dead card. If you're winning the game through Planeswalkers, Wraths, and targeted removal like Cut Down and Go for the Throat, it gives you virtual card advantage because your opponent's card then becomes useless, right? And so yeah, you've just got a whole bunch of different Planeswalkers that give you a lot of value to win the game. Kaya Spirit's Justice, Kaya Intangible Slayer, Vraska, Liliana Dreadhorde General that we got in Foundations, the Eternal Wanderer, Ashiok, and I think that's all of them. No, Liliana the Veil, which is why it's called the Orzhov Superfriends. It's just a whole bunch of Planeswalkers. And then you have the kind of just control strategies. So Pest Control kind of works like a temporary lockdown. Shieldred's Edict, Long Goodbye, Go for the Throat, Bitter Triumph, Cut Down, all of the typical mono black removal suite that we see. Insatiable Avarice helps us tutor 4 cards specifically in our library. We've got Duress to hate on our opponent's hand, Deep Deadly Cover-Up for a Wrath as well, and Akhlazot's Deepest Betrayal helps a little bit, gives you a little bit of that stabilization against aggro. And it's definitely not a tier 1 deck, but it's a lot of fun if you haven't checked it out before. And it looks like there are a couple of inclusions that were considerations in the sideboard. All right, number 7 is Dimir Control, and this one we were talking about. So the Doomsday Excruciator has definitely helped this strategy out, right? So we got this one in Duskmourn, and we've talked about this one throughout the weeks, but it's been a little bit since we talked about Dimir Control, so I thought I'd just do a little quick refresher, right? The whole point of this deck is get both players down to 6 cards, and then finish them off by milling them with Jace the Perfected Mind. And then you have a whole bunch of control, so Deadly Cover-Up, the Go for the Throat, Anoint, Cut Down, etc., the black removal. And then we've got Deduce and Quick Study for card advantage to continue to answer our stuff, our opponent 1 for 1. Into the Royal here allows us to deal with problematic cards that are not necessarily creature-oriented, so we can bounce problematic enchantments and such. We can also use it to replay our own stuff. And we've also got the Liliana Dreadhorde General. I think in the control-heavy archetypes, we're going to start seeing this, see some play. I think it's a little bit too slow to make its way into Mono Black Midrange and the Demon package. But if you're certainly looking to mill them out and go for a very long strategy, then I think you're going to see more Liliana Dreadhorde General. And Cease gives us some graveyard hate, which helps up against like Azorius Oculus. And also gives us the Artifact and Enchantment hate, which can work in some matchups. And then we've got Tribute to Hunger, and this one giving us kind of an additional Shieldred's Edict. But you gain life equal to the creature's toughness, so then you can help stabilize a little bit. So a lot of times, I'm not 100% sure about this card over the Shieldred's Edict, and kind of excited to check it out. And here's a good example of every single deck. So according to the tracker, Orzhov Bats is the worst performing, or at least down there in like tier D kind of territory, right? But that's why the tier list isn't super important, right? I mean, like, that's why I stress, like, find a deck that you enjoy playing more so than like how well it's been performing, because if you can learn a deck in the ins and outs, like the lines and how your strategy to beat a specific matchup, you can take it to Mythic. You just, if you're stuck in Diamond or you're stuck in Platinum, try to figure out why, right? Figure out, like, are you not mulliganing maybe as well as you could be? Like, maybe you need to redo your mulligan strategy. Maybe you need to rethink like which lines you're taking against which decks. And anyway, Magic's a fun game because of that aspect, that it's more challenging to take something like Orzhov Bats to Mythic than it is to take something like Mono Red Aggro, right? And because like Mythic doesn't really matter, right? Like you get pretty bad rewards, and like unless you're in the top 1200, then you're not getting any play-in points. You can definitely kind of like, I think everybody, you can relax, right? You don't have to take it so seriously, because some people get like really ragey in if they're not able to do it, right? Like they get really frustrated, and if you could kind of let go of that frustration. I digress, but you may enjoy the game more. So there are a couple of things that I think lend this Orzhov Bats strategy to finding success where Orzhov Bats has failed in the past, and that is kind of bringing in the one-turn kill off of the Bloodthirsty Conqueror. There's lots of different ways to turn on the loop, lots of different things that trigger the life gain: Sheltered by Ghosts, Deep Cavern Bat, Rune Lurker Bat, Case of the Uneaten Feast, because there's like this life link kind of, or life gain kind of synergy that goes on with the Orzhov Bats strategy, right? So then all you need to do is hit either the Starscape Cleric or the Enduring Tenacity to be able to get the infinite loop started, right? The one downside with this list is that there's not a particularly good tutor. So the Bloodthirsty Conqueror is a one of, and so they're not leaning too heavily into it. But Alinda, Saint of Dusk, is another one that has been performing very well, and I think we'll find a home somewhere in Orzhov. And then we also have the Leyline of Hope. And this, I haven't seen this one explored yet. Because of all of the life gain, I think it makes a lot of sense. You might have to mulligan pretty heavily to have the Leyline of Hope in your hand. Not sure if the pilot of this deck was kind of just playing it as just playing it as normal and then treating it as a boon if it was in their opening hand. But you'd have to play around with that, because sometimes the Leylines need a heavy mulligan strategy to go find them, but not everyone does. And we also have the Crystal Barricade, which is a 0/4 wall that can really help while you're beating your opponent up in the air, can kind of slow their pressure down on the ground. And Amalia gets really big off of all of the life gain, and Zoraline is able to bring back a lot of your cards. Gumdrop Poisoner gives you more life and then also turns that life into removal. So we've seen some version of Orzhov life gain, Orzhov Bats before, and but it's been a long time since I've seen it successfully piloted into Mythic. So that one, oh, I forgot to mention, by the way, Dimir Control was by Zoop and went 96 and 61 for 61%. And then this was Orzhov Bats by Ricardo B&D and went 108 and 73 for 60% win rate. So lots of different kind of off the beaten path options this week. And yeah, so tomorrow I'll be covering the more tried and true strategies, the strategies that have worked for a greater number of people between Bronze and Mythic, that I like to do every Monday. So tomorrow will be that. And then Tuesday, if I hope I can get around to it, because I actually kind of made a scheduling conflict, but I will try my best to get the Tuesday community deck tech done. It may have to be delayed slightly. So yeah, with that, thanks for listening to my ramblings. I hope these decks find you well. I hope you have fun exploring them as we head into the second week of Foundations. Take care, everybody.